Hello, everybody. I'm managing editor of the Journal of Latin American Cultural Studies. I'm Isi Sadik, and we're here today to have a chat about the special issue that's coming up to be published in early September on the topic of the Amazon River Basin, Extractivism, Aesthetics, and Indigenous Perspectives. This issue was guest edited by Patricia Vieira, who is research professor at Universidade de Coimbra, and she is currently working on a European Research Council project on the Amazon. So this proposal came to the journal in, I think, early 2020, and the issues finally seeing the light of day today, in late 2023. It features a broad variety of articles on different contexts, but also different periods, with the rare inclusion of Suriname, which we never publish about in the journal. This chat today is going to be hosted by Amanda Smith, who has recently become member of the journal's editorial board and is also associate professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz. We have a few questions that we've... Okay, so our first question is if you could talk to us about how you developed the project, how it came about, and how it took shape.
Well, I think in order to give people who are watching us today, and you mentioned that this has been in the making for a really long time, and perhaps I thought it might be helpful to give people some context about what is happening now surrounding the Amazon and why it's becoming more and more of a pressing issue to discuss the Amazon and to think about the Amazon from a variety of perspectives. And I think a good place to start is to think about a summit that took place early this August, so early August 2023, when Brazilian President Lula da Silva convened various leaders from Amazonian countries in the city of Belém. And his goal was to come up with a joint strategy to halt deforestation and to protect the environment in the Amazon. Part of his goal was also to demarcate himself from his predecessor, the ultra-conservative Brazilian president Jair Bolsonaro, and to position Brazil as a global player in the fight against environmental degradation and climate change. And so maybe starting with the summit, we could think, what were they trying to avoid, the leaders that came together in the summit? Well, as we know, the Amazon is the largest rainforest in the world and the hotspot for biodiversity, and is also the home of many indigenous and other traditional communities that are increasingly threatened by a combination of activities. Just some of these activities, perhaps the central ones, are deforestation, that is frequently pushed by the timber industry and also by the agribusiness industry, that they wish to clear the land to plant monocultures in the Amazon, primarily soy, corn, and now palm oil, and also for cattle raising in some areas. I mean, another of these big threats is legal and illegal mining and oil drilling throughout the Amazon that ends up contaminating the waterways and then the animals, the plants, and the people. And then a third large threat that is also mentioned throughout this special issue is the construction of large hydroelectric power dams that flood large areas of the forest, right? And so scientists are warning that the Amazon River Basin could be reaching what they call a tipping point, beyond which it will become too dry to sustain a rainforest and will progressively go through a process of savanization. And this would have devastating consequences for the humans and non-humans that live in the rainforest. And it would also have catastrophic consequences for South American climates, because it would reduce rainfall in the region. And so the goal of this summit, convened by President Lula, was to tackle some of these threats to the rainforest focusing in particular on halting deforestation. And the countries ended up signing a joint declaration, the Basin Declaration, in the end of the summit on August 9, committing to strengthening their collaboration on multiple levels to protect the region. And they also committed to collaborate with Indigenous and other communities in order to achieve this goal. But still, they failed to agree on a common strategy to stop deforestation by 2030, which was one of the explicit goals of President Lula. And also Colombian President Gustavo Petro was pushing for an end to oil drilling in the Amazon, and this was also not part of the final document. So just to summarize this whole summit issue, Amazonian countries, they tend to agree in principle that it would be a good idea to protect the Amazon, but most are unwilling to significantly alter their policies of extractivism, which has been the predominant model of development in the region. And the reason why I'm mentioning this summit and why I started here is because I think it's symptomatic of many of the attitudes towards the Amazon in Amazonian countries and beyond. And I think the articles in this special issue, and going back to why it's important that it's published now, many of these articles, they really delve into this history of extractivism in the region, starting in the late 19th century all the way to the present. And I think they help us to understand how we got where we are in our relationship to this large region and to the rainforest. So that's why I think it's so pressing to have these analyses, because they can help us find paths also towards alternatives, because many of the essays not only explain the history of extractivism, but they also show that this history was always contested and show that regional intellectuals and local populations have always resisted this model of extractivism and the depredation of their land. And so this history of resistance might also offer some pointers to alternatives, to more respectful ways of inhabiting this region.
Thank you so much for that response, Patricia. Your response leads really well into the next question, which is about the historical breadth that's covered by this special issue. So you gave us a very contemporary example, but are emphasizing that these struggles have been long and ongoing, and resistance has a long history. And so I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the historical breadth of the articles in this issue, and what conceptual moves, themes, and insights emerge when we look at these articles, the span of time that they cover.
Well, I guess, as I was saying, the special issue starts roughly at the end of the 19th century and goes pretty much all the way to the present. And there is a reason why this time frame was chosen. It's because the Amazon suffered a very deep transformation in the end of the 19th century, when latex started to be extracted from rubber trees native to the region and sold abroad. I mean, latex was already known. Indigenous communities knew about latex for a really long time, but it was in the end of the 19th century that it started to be commercialized abroad on a massive scale. European markets and North American Arctic markets were hungry for rubber. It was used in the automotive and many other industries. And so they were ready to pay very large sums of money to buy this commodity, which is, the rubber tree is native to the Amazon, so it existed there. And so it was extracted and sold abroad, which led to what we might call a rubber rush. So everyone just all of a sudden started going to the Amazon to try and take advantage of the sale of rubber that was even called the white gold, because it brought so much wealth to the Amazon. And so what we have is a region that used to be pretty much in the periphery of South American economy, all of a sudden jumping into the limelight and becoming very rich in a very short period of time. And so we have Amazonian countries trying to establish greater control over the region, which ended up even leading to a few skirmishes and even full-fledged wars, such as the Acre War between Bolivia and Brazil over the territory of Acre that used to belong to Bolivia and then became part of Brazil as a result of this conflict. And so the special issue time-wise starts in this period, and two of the articles in the issue focus specifically on this period and highlight the social impact of the rubber boom on Amazonian societies, because the industry was dominated by rubber lords, and it depended heavily on both indigenous labor and also migrant labor of people who came to the Amazon hoping to get rich very easily, and ended up doing slave-like labor in horrific conditions. And so cities grew very fast, cities such as Iquitos in Peru or Manaus in Brazil. And that's where most of those migrant workers ended up after the rubber boom went into decline. And also many of these migrants brought new pathogens to the Amazon that ended up infecting people in indigenous communities, which were decimated by these new pathogens. And so the texts analyzed in the special issue and the photographs analyzed in some of the articles in the special issue, they really emphasize this exploitation of workers in the first decades of the 20th century. And then the other articles continue showing how this pattern of extractivism that started on a large scale during the rubber boom continued to be the economic pattern that is still prevalent in much of the Amazon today. So there is this idea that the Amazon is sort of a vast natural expanse, full of natural resources that just can be exploited and monetized and sold. And throughout the past century, in many of these mega projects that were implemented in the Amazon, this is the idea that underlies these mega projects, be they those huge power dams, oil drilling, large mining operations, and so on, all the way to intellectual extractivism that entails the appropriation of indigenous knowledge without acknowledging its source. And you, Amanda, and the article you co-authored for the special issue touches a bit upon this issue of the cultural appropriation of indigenous knowledge. And so just to go back to your question, one very pervasive topic that emerges throughout the articles in the special issue is really this view of the Amazon as a storehouse of nature that can be exploited at will for maximum economic gain. And this cuts across most of the countries of the Amazon. So we have in the special issue articles about Brazil, Colombia, Suriname, and Venezuela. So a variety, and also Peru, so a variety of Amazonian countries. And this is something that cuts across all of these countries, this view of the area as just a place where you can go and grab whatever you need and make money out of it. And so the area is often perceived also, and this also comes through in many of the articles, as a kind of an empty expanse of land. And indigenous and other traditional peoples of the area are usually ignored in decision-making processes about the region. And so this, I would say, is one topic that brings together all the articles. And it's something that we still see today, perhaps not so much. I know the case of Brazil the best, and this was something that was very obvious in the government of former President Jair Bolsonaro, right? His goal was just to open the Amazon for business, basically, as if there was no one living there. And so everyone else from the rest of the country was invited to move to the Amazon and just do whatever they could to make money the fastest way possible. So basically, this was his approach, and is still the approach of a faction of lawmakers in Brazil, right? I mean, there's still a struggle about this issue in Brazil. And then another topic that I think unites all the articles is the creative ways in which local communities resist against their racist marginalization in decision making and against exploitation. And they do this through strategic alliances, often with non-Amazonian intellectuals, with activists, but also in collaboration with more than human beings that also inhabit the territory and are also a part of what the Amazon is, and as exploited as the human communities.
Thank you so much. One thing that you have been touching on in your responses is the sort of breadth also, or the range of texts that are addressed in this issue. There's travel writing from an engineer, a Portuguese novel, film, photographs, Indigenous collective letters. Can you talk about what this diversity of primary texts brings to Amazonian studies?
Sure. So I guess we already mentioned that it's a very biodiverse region, but the region's human inhabitants are also extremely diverse. So the Amazon River Basin spans 9 South American countries, is home to many indigenous and other traditional communities, to settlements of runaway slaves, and increasingly to large cities. And we mentioned already Belém, Manaus, and Iquitos, where many of the migrants that flocked to the Amazon during precisely the rubber boom period have been settled. And being the largest rainforest in the world, the Amazon is also part of the global imaginary, and it has attracted many explorers, visitors, adventurers, and so on. Right? And so this variety of human and more than human communities, and also the variety of interactions between all of them, can only be understood, I think, through an analysis of a variety of sources, as you mentioned, of primary sources that include, in this special issue, text, cinema, photography, artifacts, art, and so on. And I think this is the only way to start to trying to understand a bit of the Amazon. And so I think the essays in the special issue, they shed light on extractivism in the region through this variety of perspectives. And they also, this variety of perspectives also uncovers the voices of some of those communities that I just mentioned that have often been silenced by a kind of a one-sided notion of what progress should be. And these communities sometimes express themselves through alternative means, and it is therefore necessary to listen to their expressions and articulations that are not always obvious. Sometimes they're hidden in the interstices of mainstream texts or of mainstream images. And I think the essays do a good job in trying to uncover these voices that are often not so obviously there, but that if you dig a bit deeper, you can start seeing all of those indigenous perspectives, especially in earlier texts and artworks and so on from early 20th century, at a time when indigenous people really were not heard at all. I mean, and so I think the texts do a good job in trying to listen to those voices that are camouflaged under layers of other ideologies, ideas, and so on. And so an example, Carolina Sá Carvalho's text analyzes the photography of an American photographer, Dana Merrill, who depicts workers from the Madeira Marmoré railway construction in Brazil. And so through her analysis, we can see, of course, the standpoint of the photographer, but also some of the images tell us something about the lives of those workers, the diseases they suffered, and their own day-to-day existence, so to speak, right? Similarly, Javier Uriarte's text examines the reflections of a Colombian engineer who is working basically for the establishment, but starts questioning his views on the indigenous population of the Amazon. So what we have in the essays is an analysis of these and undercover perspectives that really come to light as the analysis unfolds. And so I think that's also one of the greater strengths of this collection of essays, really, to bring together this variety of approaches, and then to see how indigenous voices become increasingly audible as time passes. And so the last few essays, Tiffany Higgins's essay on the Munduruku and how they protest against cultural appropriation already shows a stronger indigenous presence in public discourse, and your own co-authored essay as well already shows how indigenous art is occupying a larger place in the public sphere now in the beginning of the 21st century. So we see how these voices progressively become more part of mainstream discourse and contribute to offer us a broader, more encompassing picture of what the Amazon is.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. You know, we keep asking these questions as if the essays kind of came to be on their own, but obviously as the guest editor, you're curating these essays and selecting the ones that are going to do what you want the special issue to do. And so, you know, in addition to the historical breadth and sort of the diversity of text, you've selected essays for this issue that are very interdisciplinary. They bring a lot of perspectives to bear on cultural studies, right? Whether it's visual studies, anthropology, you know, public health. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about why interdisciplinarity is so important to Amazonian studies in general, why you selected that kind of essay for this issue, and why we need to think interdisciplinarily when we think about the Amazon.
Sure. So I think that's really connected to the previous question. So the Amazon in its complexity can only be understood by going back to a variety of different primary sources. And in order to understand this variety, I think we also need to think outside the box, so to speak, and to leave disciplinary boundaries and to try to my dog. Sorry. So we need to leave this disciplinary boundaries and to try to think outside of them in order to grasp this complexity that is life in the region. And another point is that many cultural productions, if we want to call them that way, from the Amazon, for instance, the thought of indigenous peoples is very difficult to place it within disciplinary boundaries. Is it philosophy? Is it literature? Is it culture? I mean, the very notion of culture is questioned by many anthropologists that discuss the Amazon. The boundaries between nature and culture are put into question by Amazonian thought. And so in order to do justice to this very rich cultural life, it is important to approach these texts, films, photography, art, and so on through different or with looking at them through different lenses, ranging in this special issue from literary and film studies to historiography, anthropology, and so on. So I think in order to think and reflect about the history of extractivism in the Amazon, and especially in order to imagine the Amazon through the perspective of those who live in the region, and beyond this sort of stranglehold of extractivism that has been weighing on the Amazon for so long, one needs to think creatively in the same way as the local population resist creatively to this to extractivism. And so I think all the essays in the special issue do a really good job in trying to move away from a one-sided view of the Amazon, and to try to think about the region from these different perspectives that also encompass a multiplicity of voices from the various peoples, and also the non-human beings who live in the Amazon, and who are a part of what makes that region so rich.
Well, great. Thank you so much. I think that is a really wonderful introduction to this really special issue that is coming out soon. My cat decided that it's now time to be on Zoom. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Patricia, and thank you so much for all of your work on this issue over the pandemic and getting everything together. It's a really beautiful issue, and I think it's going to make a big impact. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for helping me put together this special issue. It was a lot of work. I wanted to thank Isis in particular. I'm sorry. What? How do you say your name? I'll repeat it.
It's fine. It's fine. You said it fine.
Isis?
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to thank the journal, and Isis in particular, for all the hard work in putting together the special issue, in editing all the essays, and in making them the rich and diverse collection of texts that they are. And I think it will be wonderful to see them finally all together. And I think to also listen to the dialogue between the different pieces in the special issue, and see how they really offer us a panorama of what the Amazon has gone through over the past century and a half almost.
Yeah.
You're welcome. It was our pleasure. Thank you for this wonderful, insightful conversation that we've had. It puts the issue in light of various, it frames it in light of various contexts.
Well, it was a pleasure, and looking forward to seeing the special issue online.
Yeah, soon, hopefully.
All right.
And also, to those of you who are, did you mute me? To those of you who are reviewing, we have, I think, 4 articles plus the introduction that are either free access or open access. So go ahead and read them, distribute them, download them, and enjoy.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.